I'm Eric Anderson. Tonight on KPBS Evening Edition, a plane crashes on a driveway in the East County, killing 2 people. What federal investigators know about the single-engine aircraft.
And San Diego Unified Schools dodged the statewide teacher shortage, how they did it, and why they're preparing to hire more teachers. Plus, a new report on the financial impact of expanding San Diego's convention center and how it could change downtown's landscape.
If you're going to do it, and say San Diego is the proving ground for this, it's a private venture in public property, and we're gonna be the proving ground, we damn well better do it right.
Diving into the fish farm business, the largest operation in the United States may be hatched here in San Diego. The critics are sounding the alarm on what may happen to wildlife in San Diego Bay. KPBS Evening Edition starts right now. Good evening. Thanks for joining us. Dwayne Brown is off. There is a changing of the guard coming at the state capitol. Assembly Democrats have voted to replace San Diego's Tony Atkins as Speaker. The Sacramento Bee reporting that they selected Lakewood Assemblyman Anthony Rendon to replace her, but that won't happen until next year. Atkins will remain as Speaker while the legislature finishes out its 2015 session. She terms out of the Assembly next year. New details tonight on the California wildfire season. Numbers show that firefighters are responding to more incidents than ever before. Fire crews from CAL FIRE and local agencies are responding to nearly 5,000 fires since the beginning of this year. More than 128,000 acres have burned so far. The number is up from the same period last year. Firefighters handled more than 3,300 wildfires over a 5-year average. As San Diego braces for September and October, the most dangerous fire months in the county, the city is getting a new fire chief. Brian Fennessy, assistant fire chief, is taking over for retiring chief Javier Maynard. Fennessy stood with San Diego Mayor Kevin Faulconer at Montgomery Field as the announcement was made today. His plans as chief include addressing diversity issues and hiring more women and improving emergency response times.
Community leaders and residents accept responsibility for living in an area with wildfire hazards. They have the knowledge and skills and have adapted tools and behaviors to prepare in advance for their community's resilience in a wildfire-prone environment.
Fennessy's appointment will go before the City Council for confirmation. California's manufacturers are some of the most efficient in the nation. A new report from the nonpartisan think tank Next 10 finds the state's high power prices and tough climate change laws have made manufacturers better. Among the findings, California, the second most productive state in the U.S. when you compare productivity to energy use. The report says the state is achieving economic growth while passing legislation designed to shrink the state's carbon footprint. Supporters of SB 350, the Clean Energy and Pollution Reduction Act, met with State Senator Marty Block today in San Diego. They were looking for his support to defeat some last-minute amendments that might sap the strength of the legislation. Members of the local Climate Action Campaign are worried that one last-minute amendment makes it harder to approve a community choice power provider. SDG&E officials say they just want to make sure that community choice providers follow the same renewable energy rules that they are required to follow. Yesterday, we told you about plans to build the country's largest fish farm off of San Diego's coast. The aquaculture project would have a footprint of 1.3 square miles, slightly smaller than Balboa Park. In part 2 of our series, KPBS reporter Claire Tregeser details environmentalist concerns about that project.
On a cool morning a few weeks ago, I boarded a small boat with Matt O'Malley. He's a lawyer with the environmental group San Diego Coastkeeper. We set out from Shelter Island. After 45 minutes riding through some very choppy waters, we rounded Point Loma and stopped at a spot 4 miles off Ocean Beach.
You come out to a place like this, you can see how quiet it is, how pristine, how beautiful it is.
While 4 miles sounds like a lot, you could clearly see houses on shore.
I mean, you know that some of these people are going to be out here looking at this.
This is where Rose Canyon Fisheries would go. It's an aquaculture project proposed by a private investor firm and the Hub SeaWorld Research Institute that would produce 11 million pounds of yellowtail and sea bass a year. O'Malley equates it to industrial farming.
An animal feed lot, like a giant sort of, constrained animal cow farm or pig farm, and with no environmental regulations, no property right.
Because it would go in federal waters, Rose Canyon Fisheries wouldn't buy or lease its space. It would have to get permits, but the project is the first of its kind, so there isn't an established federal agency to approve the project.
If you're going to do it, and say San Diego is the proving ground for this, it's a private venture in public property, and we're gonna be the proving ground, we damn well better do it right.
O'Malley has several environmental concerns. The 11 million pounds of fish will create a lot of, well, fish poop. He says that waste could hurt the water below the farm and the ocean floor and could lead to algae blooms. Fish could also escape the cages and then breed with wild populations, hurting their genetic diversity. Diseases in the farm could also spread to wild populations. And he says marine mammals like sea lions will be attracted to all of those cage fish. They might get caught in the farm's cages or on its anchor lines. He says the farm could also change whale migrations and wild fish behavior.
We're talking about putting a floating factory farm right off the coast in San Diego.
I mean, if people were to sit down to their breakfast and say, I'm not going to eat anything farmed, then it's going to be a pretty light breakfast.
Don Kent heads the Hub SeaWorld Research Institute, which is organizing the project. He doesn't dispute its industrial farm label, but says it won't hurt the environment. He says they're using thick lines and plastic nets that won't entangle marine mammals. He's done modeling to show the farm is in deep enough water to dilute the fish poop. The cages are designed so the fish won't escape, and even if they did, they won't have diseases to spread. Kent also says it will take 8 years to scale the farm up to its full size, and he'll be monitoring its environmental impacts along the way, just like you would with any farming project.
On a chicken farm, you're growing a live organism. You have to feed it. You have to keep it healthy. You have to, you can't let the conditions around become detrimental to its health.
But O'Malley with Coastkeeper points out the project's permits are for its full size. So once it's approved, it could begin churning out more fish before the impacts are fully known.
This is our backyard, and this is a project that is massive and has a lot of potential impact. And we think as a community, if we're going to be embarking on a project like this, we want to make damn sure that environment is protected in the process.
He says Coastkeeper will do whatever it can to ensure the project is vetted, including suing if necessary. That would still leave the problem of America's seafood imbalance. Right now, the U.S. imports 91% of its fish, and supply is dwindling. Claire Tregesser, KPBS News.
For part one of this story, you can go to kpbs.org/aquaculture. Electronic cigarettes are marketed as a healthier way to smoke, but new research reveals e-cigarettes exposes users to cancer-causing gases. KPBS health reporter Kenny Goldberg joins us from our North County Bureau. Kenny, who did this research and what did they find?
The Oakland-based Center for Environmental Health did the research, and they tested 97 different e-cigarettes and other vaping products. They were looking for evidence of two carcinogenic gases, formaldehyde and acetaldehyde. And what they found is more than half of the products they tested had levels of one or both of these chemicals, and many of the products had higher levels than are acceptable vis-a-vis California standards.
E-cigarette companies say that their products are safer than regular cigarettes. What does this research say about that claim?
Well, I think first it's important to note that cigarettes are very, very toxic. So to say that a product is safer than a cigarette sets the bar pretty low. Secondly, neither this nor any other study has established definitively whether e-cigarettes are less harmful than regular cigarettes. But one thing this study does say is that e-cigarettes themselves are toxic.
I understand the federal government doesn't regulate e-cigarettes or other vaping products. What's going on there?
That's right. The FDA does not regulate e-cigarettes. They have issued some preliminary regulations, And critics say they're just not strong enough, especially when it comes to marketing e-cigarette products. A lot of e-cigarette makers market their different flavors, Crunch Monster, Spice Jam, Caramel Apple, and critics say these kinds of flavors appeal to kids. And just as the federal government regulates tobacco advertising, they'd like to see the federal government regulate e-cigarette advertising too.
KPBS health reporter Kenny Goldberg. Thanks, Kenny.
Thank you.
California schools continue to struggle with a teacher shortage, but that's not the case yet in San Diego. Peggy Pico explains why and how local schools are planning for the future.
San Diego Unified School District has just 40 teacher vacancies this year of the 6,000 teachers already working. Not bad compared to teacher shortages in other districts throughout the state. California's Department of Education reports at least 21,000 more teachers are needed in public schools this year. Joining me with what's being done to retain and recruit teachers locally are my guests, Acacia Thede, SD Unified's Human Resources Director, and Joe Johnson, Dean of the College of Education at San Diego State University. And Joe, why did the teacher shortage start, and how many vacancies are there now?
So the teacher shortage was influenced hugely by the recession that has occurred over the past several years. Shortages of resources led to school districts deciding that they could not afford to keep teachers, and so school districts laid off teachers. And as a result of those layoffs, many young people who were considering teaching decided to choose otherwise.
Sure, I want to get to that, but first, so the Great Recession, you know, of course, there were a lot of pink slips, there were a lot of layoffs, as you're talking about. But we've rebounded from that. So why now? Are people skittish of going into the profession?
Of course. So if someone is thinking, well, my friend chose to be a teacher and got a job 4 years ago, but then was laid off right away and maybe didn't get hired back, and so do I really want to do that? And so throughout the state of California, we've seen fewer and fewer students pursuing careers in education. The number of individuals who have received teaching credentials in 2004, it was over 3,000 a year, and right now, this last year, it was less than half of that, only 1,500.
A big drop. And speaking of that, Acacia, the County Office of Education says there are 400 teaching jobs open, of course, countywide. Mm-hmm. Why do you think San Diego Unified was able to sort of dodge the shortage?
So we have 40 now, but we filled almost 400 since we began our hiring process in the spring. But still, relative to the size of our district, we have. It's a great place to work, to be honest with you. San Diego Unified has a number of things that teachers love about teaching. You can work in a very diverse working population. You can work in a number of different places. We have really great salary and we have really great benefits. And to be honest with you, living in San Diego is a great place to live. So we benefit from in ways that other districts don't, and in other places in the state don't. But what we know is going to happen is we have over 1,000 teachers who are eligible to retire and will be eligible to retire in the next few years.
Yes, and I wanted to bring that up to you. So how is the district preparing for that? Almost 1,000 or more than 1,000 teachers that could be leaving if they want to.
So for the last 18 months, the district embarked on a process to really look at this issue systemically. We're working with our community partners, San Diego State is one of them, to create our own pipeline. And so one of the things that we know is true, that when we build interest from our youth and our young people, that's one of our greatest ways to encourage people to come into education. So as Dr. Johnson said, once we get people in and interested at the beginning of their creativity about what they want to do when they grow up, basically, that's a great way for us to build our pipeline.
And speaking of pipelines, Joe, what does the pipeline look like in college students pursuing a career in education today?
Right now, the pipeline is not good. We're not producing enough teachers to meet the need that San Diego Unified is anticipating, or other school districts in the county. And so certainly we're doing more to try to help young students know that teaching is a great career, that there are going to be jobs out there for them. And that's an important message. But we also need to be thinking more as a community about, how might we entice young people to pursue a fifth year in college in order to become a teacher.
An excellent conversation for later. Joe Johnson and Akeisha Thede, thank you so much.
Thank you.
A plane crash in the East County killed 2 people today. Federal investigators trying to figure out just what went wrong. Investigators from the FAA says a pilot and passenger were on board the single-engine craft when it clipped the roof of a house this morning. It ended up on a parked car in the driveway, as you can see here. The passenger died at the scene. The pilot trapped in the wreckage. Paramedics transported him to the hospital, where he ended up dying. This happened about a mile away from Gillespie Field Airport. Authorities say the Piper Cherokee aircraft took off there before it crashed. Governor Jerry Brown has signed an updated gambling compact with the San Diego County Sequan Band. Federal officials approved the tribe's application to expand its reservation 2 years ago. Today, the governor's office says the compact provides incentives for revenue sharing. The deal covers licensing and compliance enforcement for the tribe's gaming operations. It also covers the impact of gaming on nearby communities. The possible expansion of San Diego's Convention Center, meanwhile, also continuing to draw attention. Peggy Pico takes a closer look at the financial impact of expanding San Diego's Convention Center and how that would change the city's landscape.
The $90,000 study done by Convention Sports and Leisure International looked at 2 revised plans. The report says expanding San Diego's Convention Center is a financial win for the city. Here with an update on the city-sponsored study, ongoing litigation over the project, and new design plans are my guest, urban designer Howard Blackson of Michael Baker International, and Scott Lewis, editor-in-chief at Voice of San Diego. And Scott, now the city contributed to this $90,000 price tag for this study. What did the report find?
Well, we were waiting for it for a long time because it was supposed to give us guidance on whether the same expansion that they've been planning for years, a bigger building basically, was preferred, or whether a campus style where they would do a separate facility across the street, whether that was preferred. And the study found that the bigger building was going to make more money, at least in the short term, if not over the entire term of what they looked at. And so basically they said it would benefit in 2 ways. One, in the economic activity to downtown and to San Diego, but then also to the tax base, that we as a city have a 10% stake in the outcome of how hotels do. And they said we would get more money out of it. Now, you could question that because as the convention center industry across the country is not necessarily growing, people aren't going on more conventions, we're just trying to protect our slice of it. And so they say we have to grow our facility to do that.
Let me ask you this, though. There's pending litigation over the Coastal Commission's approval of expanding the convention center at its current site. So would building at the campus site or the other, across the street, would that end that litigation?
It would. The attorney who's pushing that, Corey Briggs, has said that that's his preferred settlement, but the mayor very clearly chose not to try to put to rest this litigation by choosing that instead, and so we're up for a big fight. He's basically looked at this situation and said, well, here's the hardest route, but it's still the most beneficial, and he's going to plow forward with it. And it's hard not only because of that litigation, but because also he said we're going to have to raise taxes for that, and tax increases for a specific project require 2/3 vote approval.
Yes, and we want to come back to that, and you're speaking of Mayor Faulkner on that. But Howard, first, this revised campus plan, let's talk a little bit more about that. It calls for this separate building or buildings within walking distance to the convention center. As an urban designer, do you see that one plan is more beneficial than another?
I do see that the contiguous expansion plan is the short-term preference, and that is what we have today, is this one building. However, as we push, this is the last step into the Bay, and the inevitable is that we have to go to a campus plan, and it also meets the needs of the future conventions. While conventions might not be expanding in the conventional way, of the past, they will continue and grow, and they're growing towards a campus-style plan where the experience of the place is as important as the space available for lease.
And when you're talking about the experience here, San Diego specifically is known for its outdoor and walkable neighborhoods. Is that something you think is important?
I think that looking at the campus plans, the convention centers in Moscone and San Francisco, Orlando should tell us that places with really great weather and really great cities are better than the Vegas or the Atlanta style single building. So yes, taking advantage of our greatest opportunity of being outdoors is a good idea.
And Scott, how much would either of these expansions, if they went through, cost, and where would that money come to pay for it?
Well, the estimate is at $549 million for the bigger building. And I think, but I bet you we're going to start to see a smaller design emerge from that, and so it'll probably be even less than that. But there's basically one source, that tax increase we talked about of the hotel room tax. Right now, if you stay in a hotel room, you pay 10.5% to the city, 2% to the hotel sort of group, and then you pay, and so they want to raise that. There would be money from the Port Commission, and there might be money in the past plan. There was money coming just from the city's general fund. Let's touch back on that vote again, the public vote. As you mentioned, it would take 2/3 approval to increase the tax. Do you think that's likely? Everything has to be in line for a 2/3 vote. It bears remembering that in 2004, the city tried to raise the hotel room tax and it was supported by everybody, by hotels, by police, by fire, and only got 64% of the vote. So getting that 66.7% of the vote is a very high hurdle, and absolutely no one can be against it for it to pass. All right, so we are out of time. We'll have more on this on our website at kpbs.org. Scott Lewis and Howard Blackson, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Gwen Eiffel. On the next News Hour, Margaret Warner on the continuing debate over the Iran deal, specifically whether it's good for Israel or America. That's Thursday on the PBS News Hour.
A tiny pup with a big heart and plenty of energy getting help from the San Diego County. Scooter the Chihuahua has gone through surgery for his back legs. Now the kneecaps on his back legs rolled inward, pulling on the muscle so he couldn't straighten out the legs. But with physical therapy, the dog should soon be up and running and ready for adoption in a couple of months. The California Center for the Arts Escondido has faced some economic challenges in recent years, but it's now rebounding. KPBS arts reporter Beth Accomando checks in with the new executive director.
The California Center for the Arts Escondido has been jumping hurdles since it was built 2 decades ago. Jerry Van Leeuwen says the hope was that it would help change the image of the once agricultural North County city.
The residents that were here that I talked to from time to time who were part of the vision, they really saw this as a way for Escondido and the North County to come of age and be of something of significance.
But sometimes it's hard getting people from outside the community to come visit.
We had someone came up from Del Mar, and I was chatting with them at a reception, and they said, you know, it's not quite as far as I thought it was. And we even checked to see if there was any hotels along the way. So it's maybe not as far as you think it is, and we think it's always worth the trek no matter where you come from.
300,000 people decided to make that trek last year, and it's taken a lot of hard work to get the center thriving. It even generated $5 million in revenue with 10 sold-out shows last season.
It had been struggling financially, and my predecessor and the board really reduced the programming, closed the museum, went to a very limited performing arts season. When you've gone through a low period and you've kind of not had a lot of activity, it takes a little while to bring that back up so that people start to think about, well, what should we do next week or next weekend, that they have a thought to wonder what's going on at the center.
Now the answer is a lot's going on. The center just announced its new season, which kicks off with the San Francisco Comedy Competition on September 23rd and continues with performers such as Vince Gill and Melissa Etheridge performing in the beautiful 1,500-seat concert hall.
The design, I think, was to make it feel like an old-school opera house and to be a very classy kind of place to be. There was a lot of attention given to the acoustics so that the performers would have a really wonderful experience.
There's also a smaller 400-seat venue as well as a museum.
The current show that runs through September 13 is Writing with Pictures, and it's about illustrators of children's books, a really great family exhibition. In the museum, we have professional artist exhibitions. We also have a student wall so that the local kids' art is displayed simultaneously with people with great reputations in art. That, to me, captures what we're about.
The arts complex also includes a conference center that provides a source of revenue to help support the arts and education programs. The goal is to become the Balboa Park of North County.
We want people to come here to have their festivals and their weddings. We have lots of weddings here on our campus, and we had NerdCon here a couple weeks ago. The board has said we want to get a different audience on the campus. We achieved it that day. The goal accomplished.
After 2 years as executive director, Van Leeuwen gives the facility a B+.
I think there's always room for improvement. I think the board, and certainly I, have interest to do a broader and more effective job in reaching out to the Hispanic community as well. We're starting some new programming every Friday night in September, Musica in La Plaza.
That epitomizes the community feel that Van Leeuwen and the center are striving for in everything they do. Beth Accomando, KPBS News.
And if you're looking ahead to the weather forecast for the Labor Day holiday weekend, it's going to be a little bit mild out there. Temperatures at least starting off in the 70s, overnight lows in the high 60s. 70s and 80s out in the inland valleys, a little bit more comfortable in the sleeping area. And then 70s up in the mountains. And if you look out into the deserts, of course, triple digits. It's what you expect this time of year. Overnight lows in the mid-70s. You can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org/evening edition. Thanks very much for joining us. We'll be back here again tomorrow night. Have a great evening.